Okay, so you see these incredible detailed images from an MRI machine, and you have to wonder, how does it actually work? Well, it's not magic, it's this really fascinating dance of physics. In this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on the fundamental principles. We're talking about three key concepts: the relaxation times T1, T2, and T2 star. Our whole story kicks off at the precise moment a radio frequency pulse gets switched off. Everything we need to know comes from what happens right after that. So let's dive in. So here's our game plan. We'll start right after that big RF pulse. Then we're going to tackle two processes that happen at the exact same time: T1 longitudinal recovery and T2 transverse decay. We'll figure out why they happen at such different speeds, and then we'll put it all together to understand the signal we actually measure, which is called the free induction decay, and its own special time constant, T2 star. All right, let's get right into it. Imagine a huge number of protons inside the body, all just kind of hanging out, aligned with a big, powerful magnetic field. They're at their lowest energy state, they're at equilibrium. Then, bam, we hit them with a blast of energy, a 90-degree RF pulse. We've just completely knocked them off balance, and now we turn that pulse off. What happens next is this beautiful cascade of events as the whole system tries to get back to that relaxed, low-energy state. This right here, this is where the action starts. That RF pulse did its job perfectly. It took the net magnetization of all those protons, we call that vector M0, and it just flipped it 90 degrees right into the transverse, or XY, plane. So now we've got this new vector, MXY, and it isn't just sitting there, it's spinning. And that is absolutely critical. A spinning magnetic field is a changing magnetic field, and thanks to Faraday's law of induction, that's exactly what you need to induce a current in a receiver coil. This is literally the birth of the MRI signal. So, the very instant that RF pulse shuts off, a fundamental law of thermodynamics takes over. Every system wants to be in its lowest energy state. For our protons, this means two things start happening at once. Think of it like a team of synchronized swimmers. The RF pulse is the starting gun. They all dive in and start their routine in perfect harmony, perfect phase. But then two things happen. First, they start getting tired and begin swimming back to the side of the pool. That's their low energy state. That's realignment. But at the same time, some swimmers are faster than others. They get out of sync. That is dephasing. And this illustrates those two processes perfectly. On one hand, you've got the longitudinal magnetization, MZ, and it's making a comeback. As more and more protons realign with that main magnetic field, MZ just gets stronger and stronger. But at the exact same time, the transverse magnetization, MXY, is fading away. As the protons lose their coherence, their individual magnetic fields in that XY plane start to cancel each other out, and that net vector, MXY, just shrinks. It's like a seesaw, right? As one goes up, the other goes down. But here's the twist. They aren't connected. These are two totally independent processes, and they happen at very different speeds. Okay, so let's zoom in on that first process, the comeback of our longitudinal magnetization. This is the slow, steady journey of the protons returning to equilibrium. They're shedding that extra energy they picked up from the RF pulse and just getting back in line with the main magnetic field. It's really a marathon, not a sprint, and it's a huge part of the whole MRI story. So we know MZ is on the road to recovery, but how fast is it going? How do we actually quantify that rate? What's the mathematical constant that tells us how quickly it's going to get back to its full strength, back to M0? Well, the answer to that question is the T1 relaxation time. So T1 is our time constant, and it goes by a few different names, and honestly, each one gives you a little clue about what's physically happening. Longitudinal relaxation is pretty obvious. It's recovery along the z-axis. Thermal relaxation tells us the protons are just trying to get back to thermal equilibrium, but my favorite is spin lattice relaxation. It perfectly describes what's going on. The spins are literally handing off their extra energy to the surrounding molecular lattice. It's like they're passing a baton in a relay race of physics. And now for the math. But don't worry, think of this equation as the recipe for MZ's recovery. M0 is the end goal, right? The full strength magnetization. The exponential term in the parentheses is like a timer. At the very beginning, when time t is 0, that whole exponential is 1, so MZ is 0. But as time marches on, that exponential term gets smaller and smaller, and MZ grows, getting closer and closer to its destination. And T1? T1 is the secret ingredient. It sets how fast the whole process happens. A short T1, like in fat, means a really fast recovery. A long T1, like in water, means a much, much slower one. All right, so while MZ is on its slow, steady climb back to the top, a completely different drama is unfolding in the transverse plane. And it's a much faster, much more chaotic story. We're about to see the rapid and pretty spectacular collapse of that transverse signal. So buckle up.
Okay, so a new mystery. We know MXY is fading out, but just how fast is it disappearing? What's the time constant that describes the rate of this decay? If you're thinking this sounds a lot like the T1 question we just asked, you are absolutely on the right track, and the answer is, you guessed it, the T2 relaxation time.
So T2 is our new time constant, and just like T1, it's got a couple of aliases. Transverse relaxation. Well, that's self-explanatory. But the real clue, the one that tells you what's really going on, is spin-spin relaxation. See, this decay isn't about protons giving energy to the lattice. This is all about the protons interacting with each other. It's like a group of dancers who start out perfectly in sync, but then they start bumping into each other, throwing each other off beat. It's that chaos that causes the rapid decay of the MXY signal. And here's the math that brings that T2 decay to life. M0 is our starting point, right? Maximum signal right after the pulse. The exponential term here is basically a countdown timer. As time ticks on, that MXY signal just fades away into nothing. And T2, that's what controls the speed of the countdown. A short T2, which you see in solid tissues, means a super fast countdown and a quick fade to black. A long T2, like in fluids, means that signal is going to stick around for a lot longer. Okay, pause. This right here, this is probably the single most important idea to grasp. If you take one thing away from this whole explainer, let it be this. T1 recovery and T2 decay are two totally separate things. They happen at the same time, sure, but they are not connected. One is the slow, steady process of giving energy back to the world around it. The other is this super fast, chaotic process where the spins just lose sync with each other. They happen at wildly different speeds. And this difference, this is at the very heart of how we create contrast in MRI. Now, just for a second, let's play a what-if game. If you were just guessing, you might think these two processes would be mirror images of each other. It kind of makes sense, right? The rate you lose signal in one direction should be the same as the rate you gain it in another. But in the wonderfully weird world of MRI, your intuition is about to be proven completely wrong. Because that is not at all what happens. In biological tissues, T2 decay is the hare and T1 recovery is the tortoise. And the hare is like on a rocket fuel. It's often 5 to 10 times faster. The transverse signal is just gone in a flash, vanishing long before the longitudinal signal has even gotten back on its feet. And that brings us to the big question. Why? What is it that makes T2 decay so ridiculously fast? The answer to that million-dollar question comes down to one word: dephasing. It's a secret force in our story, the thing that's making our protons lose their rhythm and making that MXY signal disappear in the blink of an eye. So let's unmask this phenomenon and really get to the bottom of the T2 mystery. So this dephasing has two main causes. The first one is an inside job. It's called spin-spin interaction, and it's just a natural property of the tissue itself. Think of it as countless tiny magnets constantly influencing each other. The second cause is an outside job, small, unavoidable imperfections in our MRI magnet. It's like trying to dance on a slightly wobbly floor. No matter how good you are, you're eventually going to lose your balance.
Okay, let's start with that inside job. Every single proton is a tiny spinning magnet, right? So it creates its own tiny local magnetic field. This means that any given proton feels the main B0 field plus the tiny fields of all its neighbors. So, as this shows, if a neighbor proton is aligned with the main field, it adds a little extra strength, causing our proton to precess just a bit faster. If the neighbor is opposed, it subtracts a bit and our proton precesses slower. We call this precession speed the Larmor frequency. But because of these tiny random interactions, not every proton is spinning at the exact same frequency. This is the fundamental cause of T2 decay.
Now for the outside job. Look, no matter how much money you spend on an MRI scanner, you can never get a perfectly uniform magnetic field. There are always going to be tiny variations, maybe just a few parts per million. Think of it like a running track with little bumps and dips in it. Those small imperfections are enough to throw a runner off their pace. It's the same exact thing for our protons. Tiny variations in the magnetic field cause them to precess at slightly different speeds, and that also contributes to dephasing. Okay, so we've got two causes for dephasing. One internal, one external. Now it's time to put these two things together to understand what the MRI scanner actually sees. And this is where we meet the third and final member of our relaxation time family, the mysterious and very important T2 star. This is a fantastic illustration. On the left, you see the physics. That MXY vector isn't just getting shorter, it's spiraling inwards, like water going down a drain while it processes. Why? Because the individual protons are dephasing. And on the right, you see what that creates. As that spiraling vector spins past our receiver coil, it induces a current that oscillates and decays at the same time. We call this signal the free induction decay, or FID. Free because it's happening without any RF pulse, induction because it's induced in the coil, and decay, well, because it's decaying. And here's the mathematical recipe for that FID signal. It really has two main parts. The cosine term gives you the oscillation at the Larmor frequency. That's the wave part. The exponential term is the decay. That's the envelope that's squeezing the signal down to nothing. And look very closely at the time constant in that exponent. It's not T2, it's T2 star. And T2 star represents the observed decay, the one that includes all the sources of dephasing, both the internal stuff and the external stuff. This table just lays it all out perfectly. T2 is like your natural running speed on a perfect day on a perfect track. It's an inherent property of you, or in our case, the tissue. But T2 star is your running speed on a windy day, on that track with all the bumps. It's your natural speed plus the effect of the wind and the track. And because those things are always working against you, your T2 star decay is always going to be faster than your T2 decay, which means the time constant T2 star is always shorter than T2. And here it is, the grand finale equation that ties it all together. But notice, we're looking at rates now, not times. The decay rate we actually see, which is 1 over T2 star, is simply the sum of the natural intrinsic tissue decay rate, 1 over T2, plus the extra decay rate that's caused by the imperfections in our magnet. So what's the takeaway here? It means that to get a good MR signal, you need a tissue with a long T2, and you need a really, really good, really homogeneous magnet. In the world of MRI, a perfect magnet is pretty much the holy grail. So let's wrap it up. We've got the 3 key players in MRI relaxation. T1, the slow and steady tortoise of energy recovery. T2, the speedy rabbit of intrinsic dephasing. And T2 star, the rocket-powered cheetah of the actual observed signal decay. Really understanding the dramatic differences between these 3 is the absolute key to MRI. The fact that different tissues, gray matter, white matter, spinal fluid, all have their own unique T1 and T2 values is precisely what lets us tell them apart. It's how we create those amazing, life-saving images.